Hello, this is Alex from the Advent Label Applicator Company, and these are two Advent 310s that have been purchased for labeling these aerosol containers. And the machines are exactly the same. They're capable of both running these large aerosol cans and the smaller aerosol can. So everything's exactly the same. We're just going to ship them out. One set up for the tall aerosol can and another set up for the small aerosol can. So you can get both lines working or get them going right away. What I'm going to go ahead and use this video for is just point out some of the setup and operation of these machines. So we'll go ahead and focus on this one right here. This is the 310. It's designed to label these aerosol cans. Of course, you could do anything from 1 to 12 inches in diameter, but you can see we've put this on. We have a couple labels on here, but the idea is that you insert. Oops. So we insert. You grab your next container, insert. And then that label goes on, and you push through. And you're using the push-through feature. To allow you to go as fast as possible. And let's see here. As you can see, we have the rollout right here. And then we have these extensions that we've hinged. So when you receive them, they'll drop down like this. But when you're ready to integrate them into your packaging line, they're hinged, and you can have them go to a plate or go slightly down to another table. You have that flexibility. They're completely hinged. Okay. On this particular large container, this tall container, we're only running one product guide. When you run these, generally you have two on your machine, that you can see there on the other 310. And so when you're running these larger ones, you just need to remove this red knob and then slide it out. And then we actually run these. The way that we're running them is we need to keep our hand by the cap, our right hand. So we insert, and that's to make sure that it's right up against that guide. We'll go ahead and demonstrate that again. Now you can see on almost all these labels I've been going up a little bit on the high side. If that's the case, the adjustment is very straightforward. We just need to raise the container slightly. So I'm just taking my guide and just moving it over. And it's just a very, very small amount. In all these applications, the label is actually going on fairly tight, especially on the small one. So always make very, very small adjustments and run it a couple times just to make sure that everything's good. And you can see that one's pretty much a dead end. And I think from our testing, ideally you want one of the labels running up close to the that ridge or that chine. You can see that? Let me go ahead and make sure. Yeah, so this is really good. We just have a bunch of labels on these containers, but you can see I pretty much got it dialed in right there. Let's see here. This is our rewind. This is pulling up the waste material, as you can see here. We have our standard operation videos that you can see, but essentially when this gets very large, you just remove it and you take off the waste. There's an adjustable clutch on there too, which you can adjust the tension. We have it pretty much set here at the factory. You go in the back here. This is our supply roll. We're obviously using white blanks right here. We did make a slight modification to this brake arm just to give you a little bit more room. We added a spacer so it comes out a little bit further or a little bit wider, and that just gives you a little bit more room. But you just might want to take note in the video that this is where we have the labels set up for this wide container, and we're not running these guides because the label is too wide to run these label guides. So when you're running this larger one, just make sure you take that out. Let me go ahead and just show you this rollout plate too. See here, it's hinged, but when you remove it, it's just like a standard 310 plate. And you can see our threading right here. I do want to point out that sometimes people go over this support shaft right here. Do make sure that you go underneath it. Just a little helpful hint. As you can see on the webbing guides, we have these white spacers that allow you to lock in the label as it travels through the rollers. And when we're running these wide labels, we're essentially taking this white one off, and it just hangs free on the bushing. You can actually move it back into place. It's very easy. It just pressure just moves it back onto the aluminum roller. But again, you just want to take note that we're about probably 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of that black roller, and that should pretty much get you sighted in. And of course, on the front, maybe I'll keep this out. You can see we've moved one of these guides, all of them off to the right side. And of course, when you run a narrower label, you can just bring that back into place. So you just slide those over. So essentially, this is your setup. We have our white rollers spaced out, matching the width of the label, giving ourselves about 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the label. And we've done essentially the same to the front tires too. And of course, we have the modified overhead pressure arm right there. It's on the frame of the, not on the frame, it's on the cover of the machine. So that gives you a little bit more clearance as far as the push out is concerned. And that's what allows those tall aerosol cans to work really well. So now let's go to the other machine, and we'll just quickly point out the differences. So as you can see here, we have the webbing guides brought in onto the roller, and we got that label locked into place, and that's really, really important when running this white label on these smaller aerosol cans, because it's a tight fit. Ideally, we would have another 1/16 of an inch. But it's really important to get those guides into place where they're almost barely touching the backing paper of the labels, because that helps lock the labels in and prevents it from moving, shifting left and right. And let me go ahead and turn that on, just show you. Again, it's 2 hands. The first container could be a little bit hard to push in because we have a larger angle of attack, but on the next cans it's very, very easy. And you can see it's 2 hands, and it will just kind of push through, and then you just a little bit of pressure, and then you'll feel it give and then settle into place. You can see those 3 worked really well. And generally, what sometimes people do, you can see it rolls out quite nicely, is they'll push in too hard. They'll go like this. And the idea is just to find that point where you can push it up, and then it just pulls it out of your hand. And you can always see, you can see like if I'm a little bit off, I can just reset. It's nothing to be fearful of. You can see it will just grab it out of your hands, and then it will settle into the carriage. And again, we have our rollers matching the width of the label and also giving ourselves a little bit of clearance on the left side and the right side. So if you need to make small adjustments as far as placing the label, you can do that. Also with your guides, your product guides here, you want to make sure that you have a little bit of clearance. If they're in too close, what might happen is the container might be prevented from spinning, and then also it might not push through. It might bind up here at the guide. So you always want a little bit of wiggle room right there. And again, I do want to point out that on the rollout in the back, remember we do have those guides. Oops. And there's a little bit of a mistake. So you can see here, let me get that. Okay, so this webbing guide, you can see It got, there we go. It was caught on that roll. It got underneath it. You can see we just want it up against there, just like that. You can see they're easily shifted, but that helps lock the labels into place, as you can see there. And I'll just do a single container so you can see here. All right, and that's absolutely perfect. Okay, so that's the threading. Again, you're going underneath this shaft here. And you can see here on the supply, we're running the guides. And that would be important on this narrow labeler because it helps lock the tracking for the labels. Another thing I want to point out is the brake arm spring. When you're usually threading the labelers, you usually disconnect them, and that allows you to feed the labels through the machine fairly easily. When you ready to run, do make sure that you reattach that brake arm spring, because that allows only a single label to go onto the container. If you get more than one label on the product, it's usually because the brake arm spring is disconnected. And regarding that, all these machines, the pre-feed timer is set to around 4 or 5. On the 4 should be perfect for both of these labels. The idea is when we turn on the machine, we hit the trigger, and generally we're looking for about 50% of the label to be pre-fed. And then when we feed out the remainder of the label by hand, there's a lot of tension, back pressure, and that's what we're looking for. That's the brake arm pulling back, and that's what allows that label to be stretched on nice and tight without any bubbles or wrinkles. So again, this is your setup. As you can see here, we have these white tires that are moved out of the way, clearing these guides. That's in case if these guides drop down, they won't damage the white tires. So that's another little hint or something to be aware of. I'll put the plate back on, and we'll just go ahead and run that one more time just to make sure. Okay. Have the plate roll out to there. See, we have the overhead pressure arm set up. This arm can be moved left and right. If I'm a little bit off on the placement of the label, again, it's just moving our guides slightly. And you can just adjust it. These aren't the best tests because we've put so many labels on these containers, but you can always see now it's hard to tell with white labels, but we're getting that dialed in there really nicely. And unfortunately, we ran out of labels, as you can see here. So we'll just leave this in position, and we'll have everything set up. But I do want to point out one more thing. As far as maintenance is concerned, you want to keep all your neoprene tires nice and clean. After a couple months, they might get very dirty, and they might not pull or rotate the container as well. What I usually recommend is wiping them down with lacquer thinner. And those are the white tires, and then there's 2 black tires in the machine. Probably go to the other machine, you can see it a little bit easier. There's a 4-inch drive roller and an 8-inch pinch roller. Those 2 rollers come together, and that's what pulls the backing material through the machine. So do make sure those are clean. What I usually do is I take a rag, open up the carriage, and then just wipe them down. And you'll see a lot of black stuff and silicone come off them usually as the machine is used. And you keep those nice and clean, and it should be a very, very straightforward, easy application for you. So again, these are the Advent 310 set up for the 2 aerosol containers. If you have any questions, we can reach at 800-846-7716. Thank you.